Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today. We are now going to have our final discussion among councillors over budget decisions. Do we have any regrets? I see Councillor Chisholm has a regret, but is that, yeah, okay. Any declarations of community interest? Seeing none, great. Just quickly, we're going to go to 4.1. Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I do wish to declare a pecuniary interest.
Okay,
It's
thank
me,
you.
Councillor Knoll. I'm right here. There we go.
Oh, there we go. I see you there.
I wanted to declare a pecuniary interest on matters related to the Kerr Street BIA budget allocation. My company is a member of the Kerr Street BIA, and as such, any decisions that are made about that budget could ultimately impact my business one way or the other. And so as such, I'd like to declare that interest to be noted, and I will not be voting on any matter related to it.
Thank you. We will make that part of our consideration. Then moving forward, we have confidential consent item, 4.1. Do we have any people who wish to move that forward? Oh, sorry, yes, Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
So I do have a question, and I don't want to force this to go in camera extensively. I think I can ask this in the public realm. In regards to Parkland, in terms of an allocation amount to be provided, thank you for the details that you did provide on the blue paper in terms of our ability to increase that amount. I think part of my question was not just what do we have and what have we allocated, but what are our options to advance the Parkland reserve, given the magnitude of Parkland we will need.
Through you, Chair Grant, just to clarify the question from Councillor Haslett-Thiel, is it increasing the amount in the capital project or in the Parkland reserve itself?
It would need, we don't have a specific project because we do not have a specific target within the Midtown allocated yet, but so I would say it's within the reserve.
Through you, Chair Grant. So the Parkland Reserve is based off of the funds that we collect based off of what we're allowed to collect under the Planning Act. It is a very specific type of reserve for funds collected through that mechanism. Should council want to consider setting aside other funds specifically for Parkland beyond that, basically what we would be doing is carving that out from our own capital reserve to set aside for Parkland. That would be a separate, we either have to establish a separate reserve or add those funds somewhere else.
So knowing, sorry, CAO.
I just wanted to, through you, Chair Grant, if the town was considering purchasing a property, we of course bring a report forward to you for a confidential report. In that report, if there's sufficient funds if it is for Parkland, and we have sufficient funds within the Parkland Reserve, you could at that time allocate those funds there at that point in time. So it gives you that latitude to spend what is in the Parkland Reserve when properties perhaps come available that you want to take advantage of. And you can do that throughout the year.
So I appreciate that, and I fully understand that. Well, we do not have enough money set aside to address the need for a major strategic growth area. And so what I was trying to get at in my earlier request is, are our only options then what you've just described is carving out in capital a specific additional Parkland Reserve for these opportunities that would come up? Or is there another alternative, which may be tax stabilization? I mean, you're the finance wizards. We need Parkland. And I want to find a way that we're not faced with, well, we we don't have, we want to buy 5 hectares, we need $150 to $160 million. We're going to have to grow that area much more over the next few years. That's what I'm trying to achieve. How can you help me?
Do you want to go first?
Through you, Chair Grant, the Parkland Reserve, as John said, there's specific criteria, and so we can't grow it beyond what we're allowed to legislatively. If opportunities come forward for land, we understand the need for land, we would bring to council funding options at that time if there wasn't enough money in the reserve and the property was something that felt should be required, then we would bring forward a report to council for that acquisition with a recommended funding source.
So it's your advice that we do not have to set additional money aside every year and continue to grow a separate parks account beyond what we do in the Parkland Reserve? Is that what I'm understanding? And that we'll just figure out another funding option should we figure out land that we can buy?
At this point in time, that would be my recommendation. As we go forward, we will revisit that as we look at our long-term forecasting, but I think at this point in time, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I should have said through you, Chair Grant.
So do we have any issues on the report that we've received?
Well, I got issues with it, but I'm prepared to move it.
Okay, then, if we can get the motion moved, that would be great. So 4 points, great. Okay, all in favor? Thank you. So we'll move that forward, and we will move to 5.1. Now, as we move forward, I think we have a quick report from our budget team.
Thank you, Chair Grant. Before Budget Committee dives into deliberations, I did want to provide a brief recap for the committee as to where we stand now and how we got to our current position of 4.82% as part of the overall increase to the tax levy. So I just have a few slides I thought I could share with committee to help with that conversation. So maybe if Trent or Ken can bring those up. All right, so just as a reminder, we began this year's, I'll wait till we're on full screen. There we go. All right, so we began this year's process with a council-endorsed mayoral direction to staff to present a budget with an overall increase of up to 4% to accommodate priorities from council's strategic plan. And so this was also based off of the region's estimated budget at 3.6%. And so the staff budget that we prepared when we worked on this came in at a base of 3.73%. And then from there, we also identified a number of requests and initiatives that supported council's strategic priorities. And these items totaled to 1.16 million, which works out to 0.19% on the tax increase. And that brings the total to the 3.92% that you might remember from my overview presentation back in October. Since that time, there have been a couple of changes. One of them is from the region. So the region has updated their estimated budget. Their share has increased from 1.36% to 2.26% of our overall budget, and that's based off of their increase going from 3.60% to 5.99% on their actual budget. So for the town's budget, that works out to a 0.90% increase or 90 basis points. So when you add that to the 3.92% that we originally had as part of our staff overview, we end up with that 4.82% figure that I mentioned at our last budget committee meeting. There's also been a couple of late adjustments that we have here at the town. So the first is with respect to the confidential staff report from last week's council meeting prepared by Human Resources on labor relations. So this increases the total by 0.05%. And the second is for an increase to the MPAC growth number that we've received. The town's growth number has moved from 1.57% to 2.43%. Staff's recommendation is to defer this growth until next year, 2026, given the growth pressures that we're already forecasting for next year. So as a result, that doesn't change anything on this year's budget. So the 4.87 figure you see at the bottom of this screen is the starting spot that we have in the budget spreadsheet calculator that we'd be happy to pull up for committee once the time comes today, if it's helpful to you in navigating through any deliberations or questions you might have. And I also wanted to point out a couple of other things, just in case they're helpful to committee. So as requested by the budget committee back at our June kickoff meeting, we have included any business cases that didn't make it into 2025 and were deferred into 2026 so the committee could consider them and see what their impact is. There are 18 of these business cases for $1.7 million, which works out to 0.28% on the total. And then we've also included on here and on the spreadsheet the Oakville Public Library request for 16 Mile for $310,000, which represents 0.05% to the overall tax levy increase. So if all of those items were included by budget committee, the total would move from 4.87 to 5.20. That's just if they were all included. Just wanted to put that out there for any interest. And then I have a very simple graph to show this. This just demonstrates the big blue bar is the base budget for 3.73. Council strategic priorities is the slightly lighter blue bar right above it. And then you can see that we were below the target, which is the red line, which is at 4%. And then the region changes have pushed us over that, along with that slight late adjustment that I talked about a moment ago. So again, just wanted to visualize this, or help the committee visualize this as to where we started and where we are today as we head into deliberations for recommendations to the mayor. Mr. Chair, that's all I had for you this morning.
Thank you. Do you have the spreadsheet that we've all received to put on screen for us?
Yes, we also have that spreadsheet, and we'd be happy to pull that up. And then as we go through it, if there's any changes or edits to it, Dalbar can come to the podium here at the middle and help us navigate through that.
Thank you. And when you put up that spreadsheet, would you be able to put up what we believe will be happening with the region?
So through you, Chair Grant. So the region is currently sitting at 5.99%. I believe, and I chatted with the region briefly yesterday. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I believe that the item that might be before them is to further increase the police budget, which would move their number from 5.99 to 6.2%. That's up to the region and that body. I can tell our council that increasing to that number would increase our number by 8 basis points. So depending on which number you're looking at, if we're looking at 4.87, that would move us to about 4.95, give or take. There's always some rounding in there, but
I think it would be helpful as we discuss the budget today that we look at that higher number and just see what the, for want of a better phrase, worst case scenario would be. So if we can put that up on the screen as we go through this.
if we can get Trent or Ken's help with that, that would be great.
Thank you. And our first counselor to speak to this is Counselor Adams.
Thanks very much for all the information and the step-by-step set of changes that we're all expecting to see. Councillor Grant has already asked my question about the likely change in the police budget at the region, and I support the need to show complete transparency around that and show what that number would look like on our screen when we're looking at this. The only other question I had for you was, within the 2025 business case materials, are there positions there or projects there that would generate savings through efficiencies that council could consider? So would some of those projects within the 1.162 million there would those in future years generate savings?
So through you, Chair Grant, there is a position actually, and I'm not going to, let me back up a bit. Last year you had provided, I believe it was 2 positions within the Corporate Policy Strategic Initiatives Group that allows us to have a group of staff who are able to look at the processes, look at the technology that supports the way in which we do business, to look to see how we can alter those processes, add the technology in order to produce some efficiencies in the business we do. I know that the Director of Finance and myself have said at the last 2 budget sessions that we have taken out of the town all the efficiencies that are the low-hanging fruit. The efficiencies that are within our system that we need to extract are really deep cuts in terms of the complexity of the processes we have, altering the processes in order to get at those things. So this unit, in combination with the business units themselves, is looking at doing essentially that. So the one position that's in the budget, which I'm just trying to find, the name is not up there. It is the...
Sorry, I apologize for cutting it. I think there's a list in the other spreadsheet.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it is a business position, a business planning position that we've set aside. That, in combination with the positions that you had provided us last year, is the unit that will enable us to look at those deep cuts and understand what savings we can take advantage of.
Is there an opportunity for us to consider booking some of those savings this year, funding them through stabilization reserves as we have in previous budgets over the years, and then backing that out in the future year?
There is some opportunity in doing that. As you know, you had done that in a previous budget year, and we had not been able to produce those savings. I think what we found over the last year and a half, really, as we've kind of come out of the COVID time frame where a lot of things were disrupted, we know that the resources and the skill sets is not necessarily within the business units in order to achieve that. So that we have a better understanding right now of the lean processes we have in place, how we can take advantage of asset management, for example, and looking at our assets and doing those differently, and many other types of programs. So I think we have a better handle on how we can get into those efficiencies. So I would suggest to council that allow us to get that work underway with the positions we've asked for in this budget in combination of last year, so that I have a little more confidence that we, yes, can produce some savings over the next 2 years. There is a fair amount of work that is involved, and it takes some time to actually identify it and then be able to actually achieve the savings themselves.
Okay, and what would be the magnitude of those expected savings?
So we have had some preliminary discussions on the efficiency work that we expect to be doing. I think that a stretch goal for us, I would suggest, is a $600,000 over 2 years. It allows us to perhaps not take half of it in the first year because we are still working through those changes, but over the 2-year time frame, we feel that we can, as a stretch goal, look to achieving that either in actual cost savings, or the other option, which is a lot of the savings that we've had before, is really a cost avoidance. I understand that doesn't take it out of the base budget, but it limits the amount of increases we have going forward.
And that's fair. Okay, so your recommendation is not to incorporate a savings efficiency number in this year's budget, but to hold that into the base budget in a future year.
No, I think actually you could incorporate 600,000 in this budget by supplementing that with tax stabilization over the next 2 years in order for us to actually achieve those savings in the base budget.
So we could incorporate in 600,000 in savings in this year and reduce that number by a certain amount next year and phase it out by the second year.
Second year, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Could we, then through you, Mr. Chair, could we incorporate an extra line in our spreadsheet showing a savings?
Through you, Chair Grant. So we can certainly do that. I'm going to actually ask Delbar to head to the center podium there because he can probably navigate that spreadsheet better. And then we can also update the regions number at the same time so you can see what that impact is. We just have to make sure the technology works for us first.
Thank you very much.
And I'm hoping the technology works. I'd like to have a live reflection of our discussion with the budget. So if we can do that, that'd be great. And as we work towards seeing that on screen, we'll move to our next speaker, which is Councillor Giddings.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. You mentioned the additional assessment growth from MPAC, and it was on the spreadsheet that was up there, 0.86. Any projection of what we could anticipate seeing next year?
Through you, Chair Grant, if I could predict that, it would be much to my advantage as well. It's really difficult to determine what numbers we're going to get from MPAC and when they're going to come online. Our staff do an excellent job of trying to get as many building permits over to MPAC as possible, but there is no linear relationship between when we get permits finalized and when they show up on the roll. So I don't have a better answer for you than that. Sorry.
I appreciate that. In terms of that 0.86, the recommendation is still that it's better to hold that until next year, even though we don't know what an indicator of what's coming?
So through you, Chair Grant, one of the things we'd like to do as a good principle when we're looking at the growth we're receiving is trying to match it up with our growth pressures. And so when we look ahead to next year's budget, we have a number of growth items that are coming in. And so trying to match those two things as closely as possible is a good principle to follow, and that's why our recommendation would be to quote unquote save it for next year.
Thank you. So it's fair to say our challenges will continue beyond this year.
I would agree with that statement, yes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Our next person is Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Chair Grant. I just wanted to kind of reinforce what Councillor Adams mentioned with CEO Closey regarding the kind of the efficiencies. I support having positions there to be able to look at, across lines of business. How can we look at using technology? The buzzword these days is AI, but are there ways of automating things? Are there ways of also looking at processes to be more efficient? Because I think it sends a message to our residents that we are looking internally. We are trying to be more efficient in the way we deliver service. So I definitely recommend, if there is a position in the budget that we keep those and that we actually put that 600,000 over a 2-year period. Thank you.
And thank you. And I believe our numbers are, yes, they're being published live on YouTube. That's great. All right, Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to be clear about the procedure that we're going through right now. So we're obviously talking about discussing increase to the regional budget. We're talking about some of the issues my council colleagues has raised. Are we going to go through that list of the extra 1.7 million that council had recommended? How are we structuring this conversation right now where we're going to how are we going to package everything up into the recommendation to the mayor right now?
I believe that the extra 1.7 million is going to be pushed forward.
As a package?
As a package, unless there's something you want to pull out.
Well, no, and that would go to it too, because I'm between different meetings and different places. I don't see those things somewhere. I'm wondering if staff has those that they might be able to pull up or to send to us again, because I'm jumping between different council meetings and reports and appendices and trying to line up all the stuff that we're packaging right now. And it'd be nice to have it. Just
we are at your disposal. If there's something you want to pull out and highlight,
yeah, if we could
we
find
can add it.
If we could find those items that council requested that added up to the 1.7 million, and just take a look at those again, and then. Again, I did email out to yourself and to staff a couple of late-breaking things that have come up that I wouldn't mind tabling for discussion as well. And I don't know if now's the time or what.
This is your time. Let's go for it.
Thank you so much. Let me just pull that up one more time. So I've put forward a motion. I would like to put forward a motion to deal with a construction temporary street occupancy permit in the Brawny area that we're not quite sure how it's going to unfold. I can send that out to council members right now. I'll just read it briefly. If the temporary street occupancy permit for 85 Brawny Road expires or fails, that staff be directed to implement a temporary one-way southbound traffic configuration on Brawny Road from Lakeshore West to Marine Drive for a period of 24 months beginning on the date that, if it happens, until the 24-month period would expire, to update the traffic bylaw to reflect the temporary one-way southbound traffic configuration on Brawny from Lakeshore, that a sole source contract be approved for the procurement of the equipment necessary to set up the one-way street configuration in order to have the changes in place by, again, depending on and if the expiry or failure of that occupancy to be renewed. And that funds in the amount of $70,000 be added to the road safety program budget for temporary one-way conversion of Brawny to Lakeshore West Marine Drive. And I'll just speak to it briefly. We've a lot of my council colleagues know the pressures in the construction areas. I think close to 6 different construction projects in Brawny right now. One of the major linchpins, the gateway at Lakeshore and Brawny, it has stalled. And we've gone through the configuration of making it a one-way street, so there's road access and there's safety, there's truck access. It was pretty tumultuous with the neighborhood and residents in going through that change, and they've all become accustomed to it right now. If the temporary street permit fails, we would be forced to revert back to the two-way for a period of time until that development starts again, and then we would have to revert back to the one-way again. And it's a tumultuous time for residents to figure out, is this a one-way street? Is it not? Is it two ways? The moving and the changing of our road access creates some chaos that I think I would prefer if there's any way we can avoid that. So staff, thank you very much for working with me on this. And again, this is an if. We have been told by the developer that they plan to go through, but staff need this in case they don't. And I think it would be a wise move for us to do if we can. And again, if it could come out of stabilization, I don't think it would be an operating budget issue, but I would leave that to our finance staff to tell us where best it would come from. But I would put that forward to the committee for their consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Not a problem. So would that be a motion?
It would be, yes.
So if we could get you to make that as a motion.
I move that, and I will just make sure that staff or that committee members have it in front of them right now. I just read out. I just sent that, so I would move that motion.
Give me a second.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to put this as a suggestion right now, and we will vote for it at the end.
I'm at your.
And I have Mayor Burton who wants to respond to.
Mr. Chair, I understand the urgency of the matter, and I support the matter. I believe that some of what's in this motion really belongs at a council meeting rather than a committee meeting. And I would recommend that this motion be brought to the next council meeting on December 16th, and that the funding come from stabilization. And as a result, it doesn't need to be considered here at the Budget Committee, which is only one piece of a continuing process. So I think on December 16th, I believe is our council meeting, you might actually get your result faster if you go by that route.
Yeah, I either way, I was told by staff that it should go through the budget process. So I'm happy to make sure that the proper precautions are in place, however they come. So if that's the proper procedure, I'm happy to do that too. I'd maybe just look to the mayor or to whoever wants to tell me that, yep, that's perfectly fine. We can go with that.
So, Mr. Chair, I think it's perfectly fine. The use of the stabilization fund is available to council throughout the year. It's not tied to only the Budget Committee. And there were other matters that sound more like council than Budget Committee in the motion, which I totally support.
I believe the councillor is happy with moving that forward to the next council meeting, then we can do it then.
So I'd withdraw that motion then. That sounds great. Thank you very
That
much.
is absolutely wonderful, and hopefully we will solve that issue for you the next council meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor O'Meara. Our next speaker is Councilor Elgar.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair. I just want to thank staff for what they prepared for us. I think it's the most detailed report I've ever seen of how the tax dollars are spent, down to a more of a granular level. However, I'd like to ask, can staff provide, when we finish this, a more granular level related to snow clearing, leaf pickup, and also how much taxpayers are subsidizing the growth on an annual basis?
So through you, Chair Grant. So we can certainly break out the snow clearing and I believe you said leafing, correct? Programs to provide more detail on those. The subsidization of growth is not a specific line in our operating budget, so that one would be, we wouldn't be able to provide that, but certainly on the other two, we can provide you more information.
So, Jonathan, how do we get to tell the people how much there's have to subsidize growth? Which, it's a big number, and it's getting bigger this year, and it's going to keep getting bigger based on where the province is going. So how do we get around, how do we get away from hiding it?
So through you, Chair Grant, one of the struggles we have in communicating about those changes in legislation is that it's lost revenue that we're not collecting. We're not collecting as much as we would have otherwise before those changes came in. So it means that with less revenue, you have to then adjust the nature and timing of your capital expenditures and make decisions that way, or use other sources, other town sources to do that. And that would depend on the individual project that comes up. So that's what makes it really.
We cannot hear Jonathan online.
It's live here.
That's a problem.
Or maybe it's just me.
Unmute.
I'm able to hear you.
Now I can hear you. Thank you.
Can we get other members who are coming in on Zoom to let us know if they're hearing what's the response?
I couldn't hear, but now I can hear.
I couldn't, but now I can as well.
Okay, thank you. Please start from the earlier position, I guess.
All right, through you, Chair Grant. I gotta remember what I said. So I think the position that we're in with the changes in legislation is that we're collecting less revenue now than we would have otherwise before those changes were made. So when we've got less revenue coming in, we've got smaller balances in our development charge accounts. And that impacts the nature and timing of the capital projects that we do, or we need to use other town sources to fund them. And so that's what makes it really challenging to explain that number, because there is nothing in our operating budget related to it. It's really about the decisions that we make then as a town based off of the revenue that we've collected and when we're planning to spend it in our capital project and based on our master plans and things like that. So yeah, it is a challenge. I think one of the things we do provide to council is a summary spreadsheet of what those changes have been, what revenue we've lost. So I think that's probably one of the best tools we have on the communication front.
I thank you for that, but I hear what you're saying, and I realize our hands are tied, but somehow we're missing the opportunity to educate the people, thinking that as we grow, our taxes should be going down. And that's what starts happening, and it's happening more and more. And based on the numbers I see, things are going to get a lot worse. And the town, we're not a revenue generator, like it's the taxpayers' money we are using. It's the individuals with assessments. I don't know, somehow there's got to be some way to do a better job. I do believe our CAO closely sends out a monthly report telling us where we stand now in the negative. And like there's a hole. And there's no, I don't know, and there's no magic wand. Which takes me to tab 20, 19, and also 13, where we talk about communications, government relations, and public policy. And I'm just trying, can we get more details of what those people do? If I look at government relations and public policy, that we got 3 people, and I know I've already had a discussion with Julie, so does Councillor Hazard-Thiel, and I appreciate it. And I think Julie's probably ready for this question.
Thank you for your question, Councillor, through you, Chair. So the government relations, we had some research positions that were one permanent, one temporary, approved last year. And they are really focused on making sure that proper research is being done for council consideration with any changes or recommendations we're making. So we often hear the question back, what are other municipalities doing? What is the latest kind of direction on certain things? And that's what these 2 staff are really focused on. And to give a bit of an example, some of it is how other municipalities are responding to protests. What we are currently developing an idea, policy and procedure on what do we recognize, how do we respond to social justice issues. So a lot of that is handed to them where they can do the municipal scan, but also look at other research as to how are we going to position our procedure and policy on that. Of course, AI is one that they're currently working on, as well as the green development standards and incentives that are out there that is taking some of the load off of planning in order to do that. In those positions, they really do support the departments in ensuring that the staff reports that come in do indeed have that research behind them. The other piece of the role on the government relations side is, I'll describe it as the separation of church and state. So there is the political side of government relations, and then there's the administrative side. The administrative being staff to staff. So when we are dealing with issues with the province, for example, political staff don't deal with administrative staff. So we have certain research briefing requirements to prepare our staff in having those conversations with their counterparts at the other levels of government. The CAO, for example, would never deal with the minister. That's political to political. So that they are concurrent but separate processes as we work with our counterparts on dealing with issues. And of course, the timing is interesting that this question comes up this week because of the BFF funding. That's an example of where it was worked through the political side, but also the administrative side. Aligned, but dealing with our proper counterparts on that. Does that answer your first part of the question?
Yeah, well, on tab 13, where we're adding somebody for, you're saying that's the political side. That would be under Ms. Sully. Is that the group that would be?
Let me just
It's
refer
legal
to tab
compliance
13.
specialist is what we were going to hire. It's one of the 7 of where we're going from 7.5 people to 8.5 people. Legal compliance specialist.
A legal compliance specialist. Which department is that assigned with?
Where it's legislative.
Yes, legislative compliance specialist.
So my apologies for the delay on this. So that is a position that's being put through the clerk's department to focus on accessibility, the AODA requirements of the town. So that's in the clerk's department.
Okay. And there's nobody doing that currently at all?
No.
Okay.
No, we've been doing that off the side of desks, trying to meet the obligations, develop the plan, but there is a need for a position. I don't know if Commissioner Sully wants to add to that.
Through you, Chair Grant, Julie's correct. We've been doing it side of desk. Andrea Coyne in Clerks has been doing quite a bit of that work. She's going to now be switching most of her attention towards the upcoming election, and there just isn't going to be the capacity. And we have identified that it is a gap. They chair the accessibility committee. There's a whole lot of work to be done. We have to comply with legislation, provide our reports to the province, and it's just, there isn't the capacity with existing staff to meet those demands.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, and I do see that we just got a new table yesterday showing where we are cutting what was in the budget also, where we were looking for legal. We were going to go with 2 additional in the legal, and now we're going to just 1 additional. Is that correct? These are new changes? Or are we still going, where's the tab for legal? Which tab was legal? Hang on. 25. So that's what I was just trying to figure out. I thought we were going to add 2 to legal? Yes.
Through you, Chair Grant, I think, so with, in legal, there is a request in there is a 2025 priority for a screening officer. That is to meet the existing demand with the enhanced parking program. That the number of screenings has increased substantially. And so that will be to meet those demands. Through the ASE program, there is going to be the need for an additional screening officer that will come down the road. In the 2026 initiatives, there is a request for a assistant town solicitor to meet the growing demand in that area as well.
So, but forget 2026, I'm just trying to get through 2025. Right now, legal is 10.3, and it says it's going up to 12.3.
That would be because they need 1 screening officer for the existing program to meet demands, and then an additional 1 as the ASE program goes live.
And we don't have staff that can do that now at all.
Do not. We have 2 part-time screening officers as well as the prosecutor, and there just is not the capacity. There's quite a wait list. Perhaps our town solicitor could give you some more details on that.
Yeah, and maybe it's not an issue because maybe we do get recoveries.
It is
fully.
it is
100%?
covered through fees. It is 100% recovered through administrative penalties.
So there's no tax dollars at all. That is required.
I think the last report we brought forward to you is there's a small amount that's left over. I think it was, I won't quote the number. So it wasn't entirely cost recovery, but certainly the bulk of it is cost recovery.
Okay, I thank you very much. Okay, I'll put my hand down now, and because there's quite a few others I see in the queue here. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a reminder, any additions or subtractions to the budget need to be through a motion. Nevertheless, next we have Councillor Hansel-Thiel.
Thank you, through Chair Grant. I just want to follow along from the discussion about potentially noting a potential savings in the plan. Can you just refresh my memory? There was I think it was about 3 years ago, there was a commitment to efficiencies and I think it was in the ELT area, and we have now had to take back how much money into the budget because we didn't achieve it? Can you just restate that so I make sure I have clarity on that?
That amount was $350,000.
So we've now taken 350, we didn't achieve the full amount, so we've taken 350 back.
That's correct.
Okay. So I totally concur that you're probably at deep dive in terms of continuous or process improvement, et cetera. But you do currently have 2 headcounts that are, have the lean training that can focus on that. Do I understand that correctly?
I believe there is actually Julie could clarify that.
That's correct.
Okay. So the thought that we would foreshadow potential savings is one option on the table, but we didn't achieve it before. And I'm sure you made best efforts to do so. I know that community services delivered huge amounts of efficiencies, I believe, last year and the year before. But if we're foreshadowing a potential, do we have a list of those specific areas in which we really believe it will materialize?
We have identified programs already, and I know that Julie can identify those ones. I did indicate to Councillor Adams that it is a stretch goal. There are other pieces that we need to look at in order to achieve that amount as savings. I would also note that the savings that we achieved through community services was only achieved because we created a corporate office. We took, for example, Nancy Sully out of her position at that point in time in order to drive those savings. So that is actually a very good example of how trying to do it within a department on the side of their desk when they're already busy doing a lot of other things is very difficult to accomplish those savings. And in fact, the last time we had to accomplish it actually outside of the department with a different set of skill sets in order to achieve it. So I did want to clarify that, which is very similar to the step we're taking now. So there are some lean projects that we have underway. I think also there are, and I would suggest to you, some savings we have accomplished, we just have not been able to count them very well. So I do think we need to do a better job of understanding where those savings and really taking advantage of it to identify how we've reduced things over time. So I think that is another element that's there. And so I would refer to Julie if she has other specific projects in mind. But I do emphasize this is a stretch goal. We recognize that. And we will be assigning an ELT team with the business support group that we have established and the business units in order to drive this initiative forward. It is a stretch goal, but we feel that we can achieve it.
So just as a follow-up, the cost of the strategic business advisor because we just annualized all those additional headcounts and saw the implications of that ongoingly. So we do have two who have the talent to deliver currently in what has been proposed. Okay.
Yes.
I
Yes,
will
we do.
ask for the lean projects.
So we have 10 projects that have been identified for 2025. Getting the year right. They include things like the onboarding, the offboarding, and the crossboarding of staff, as an example. I can provide the list of all 10 if council is interested. There is some follow-up procurement work that is going on. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank. There are 10, and I can absolutely provide those to council.
So,
And if, my apologies. Can I add one other thing? Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. We have a process in place that identifies and gathers what those ideas are. They are not random. We use processes such as the voice of the customer, which we ask questions about what's working, what's not. That gives us a list. We also have undertaken work for every single department on their mandate, on their functions and their services. And through that work, a number of pain points have been identified. And so those then get prioritized into the type of lean training that's appropriate for it. So as the lean belts, as you go from white to yellow to green to black, the projects are more complex, and green and black belts actually require savings in order to get that. You have to demonstrate that you have savings. So we are running a number of 10 green belts, for example, which will draw efficiencies out. As CAO Clohessy mentioned, the savings are not always hard dollars, as is I'm returning you money, but through efficiency savings as well. So time savings would be an example.
Through you, Chair Grant, I just did want to add that while there are 2 positions that have been identified that are specifically working on the lean components, we have made some shifts in our organization in order to pull some of the expertise that we have in various areas that do this type of work into one consolidated unit. So they can be a lot more effective in terms of going into the various businesses in order to do that deep dive. So it is a combined effort of that group, as well as the support from the business units, of course, in order to be actually drive those efficiencies.
Okay, thank you for some of that additional information. I want to just shift gears a bit and ask questions about the deferred headcounts chart. And in particular, there is a pain point out in the community around development permits, timing of permits, the ability to access somebody to come out because there's either grading issues or anything within that development engineering. And yet we are deferring, it appears, and it's just not clear to me. It looks like we're deferring people that would be a resource to address that pain point. Could somebody just speak to, and second to that, we also have work requirements that have come to us through the transition at the region. So are we deferring a headcount that's needed for frontline service to address that pain point in this budget?
I will rely on the support of the commissioners as I go through the list that you have in front of you of the 2026. There are a number of positions in there that we had decided to defer into 2026 as they are supported by fees. And so it gives us the opportunity in 25 to actually update the fee bylaw, anticipating those elements, so that we can accurately reflect the cost of that, which would be less than what's stated on here. And so I would give you examples of that as the environmental planner would be one that would fit into that category, the environmental engineer, the noise technician, the planning technicians, or those positions that would have a component of their salary supported by fees. There are another group that we had decided to defer, and it, I think, gets at some of your questions. The construction liaison coordinator I would give you an example of. It is a position that has fairly minimal funding, if I'm looking across the chart correctly here. Yep. But it is an example of a better way in which for us to communicate what's going on in the construction. The bulk of that position, I believe, is covered by capital. So this is the impact onto the operating budget itself. But those would be representatives who could better communicate to the community the various construction projects that are coming on, keep them updated in terms of status and that type of thing. So if you're referring to frontline, I would put that one into that kind of a position. Beyond that, I'm sure there are others that fit into that. So that was some of our philosophy in terms of going forward. The bulk of them were because of the fees, though.
So if we anticipate that the majority would be covered by the fees, can we not book bringing on some of them at some point in 2025? What would address that pain point versus deferring till 2026 when the pain continues to grow?
Some of those, through you, Chair Grant, some of those positions we can actually, for example, I'll give the noise technician, could actually be covered off through requiring an applicant to pay for the peer review of that. So that's not something we could defer that one with still getting the work itself undertaken. In terms of the other positions, there is a portion that you could book to a tax stabilization or some other way, assuming the fees. But there has been substantial downloading that's come from the province to the region and now to us. And understanding the full impact that we could transfer over to fees, we felt was at this point in time minimal. Perhaps 20% of those costs we could transfer into tax stabilization. Because if we transfer too much, then it comes back as an impact in 26, which we were trying to avoid. So we felt that that we had sufficient resources for 2025 to carry on, but understanding we'd need those resources in 26.
So if somebody's building a house or building has a construction project, they're, our director in building services is like a superhero. The man has to take more calls and deal with more stuff. Will there be flexibility within the staffing element that you are putting forward that reduces the pain point in 2025 so people can get a timely response on their permit concerns, can get more support on clarifying what they need to do to get it right the first time they submit to be able to move forward with their projects?
I think as the Director of Building, Ralph Kaminsky, had indicated, and he is here, I was waiting for him to come up to the
Behind you, he's hiding.
As he indicated, we're looking at that issue from also a technology perspective. There is a new set of software that's coming in that allows for a lot more transparency in the processes that are there, so that not only is the building officials able to flag things and move things forward, but the applicants themselves can follow along. And I will leave that to Ralph.
Through you, Chair Grant. I don't want to spoil my big surprise. We have a story to tell in January where we will talking about the efficiencies and the communication improvements that we're making in building standards. So if that's a sufficient answer for you now, I'd like to leave it there. We do have a report and presentation that we'll be bringing forward in January.
So I will put you on the spot to say, will that great after Christmas surprise address the timeliness in which we either get back to people or help them advance their projects?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. Okay, shifting gears one more time. So in terms of work being done on IDE, do we have in this budget expertise, not a generalist, but expertise to address the IDE program that council heard had serious gaps and that the employees addressed as having a serious gap? Will we be able to address that with, and is the expertise in this budget?
The short answer is no. We have a staff person that is more of a generalist that is going to help land some of this work in the departments. In corporate strategy, we do have, we are recruiting right now for a position, an already funded position that's become vacant. We are open to see the candidate pool and what we're able to pull in, but we also have staff that are interested in taking on this work. And interest is a desirable trait, and we are able to offer training to bring the certifications along with it. So, but our approach generally is more of a generalist. Now, on the HR department, they are also, let me have the Director of HR respond to that piece.
Good morning, everyone. Through you, Chair Grant. We do have, thankfully, last year we did get a position under for both recruitment focus and a program strategy perspective, and that's been helping. Certainly, they're not dedicated 100% to IDEA, but that was part of the focus. We do have a request in 2025 to expand our program strategy area to help with training and to support to IDEA, and then also some one-time funding and ongoing budget funding to support training and appropriate consultants as needed to support that program.
So when is the next time you report back on IDA and ensuring that we've met some of the council direction on it?
That's for Q4 of 2025.
Okay. I'm a bit surprised we don't have a dedicated resource after what's been identified. And I get there's a lot of requests and a lot of needs, but it is an expertise. And learning it today does not make you an expert tomorrow. And it is fundamentally, it is a part of, this multicultural community we live in. They can not only help internally, but externally, that advice. So I'm disappointed that we don't have the dedicated resource, but thank you for your answers.
Okay, thank you. Next, for first-time speakers, we have Councillor McNeese, but before we do that, I'm going to mention that he was kind enough to provide a motion to all of us. And as we move forward, I'm going to ask members of council to provide motions for things that they wish to see going forward. And later on, we will vote on these motions one by one. That said, I hope everybody's seen Councillor McNeese's motion, which he sent to a few of us. And Councillor, please go ahead.
Thank you, Budget Chair Mark. So it should be top everyone's inbox there. And it comes from the November 14th budget agenda. It was Appendix F. Okay. It was Appendix F, so it's related, similar to what Councillor Mayer was talking about. There's some short-term issues we're having with Lower Bronte Road, but we also wanted to look at some longer-term fixes for that area, and it's become apparent through our streetscaping project that this is a critical link, not just for the intersection at Lakeshore and Bronte Road that's misaligned, but also it's sort of the gateway to our village. So in consulting with staff, they've provided a recommended path forward, and we think we'd be remiss not to include that in the streetscaping project. Additionally, if it were not to be included, we would not benefit from a developer paying for some of these improvements through the urban design and streetscaping funds that are held through the town. So we think the time is opportune to do this, and it would make the streetscaping project the most beneficial as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, just in case it wasn't clear, we need motions to look at, and we will vote for them or against any additions or subtractions. And I'd like to make it clear to our tech staff that we want to have those motions as we vote on them available for people to see online.
So is that clear? I moved that motion. I also wanted to note it's a capital expense, so my understanding is that wouldn't impact our spreadsheet up there that increases or decreases?
Yes.
Okay.
We got it.
Thank you.
All right. Next, Mayor Burton. I believe I had you. Nope. Okay. Then moving forward, first-time speakers, Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Chair Grant. Mine is not a motion. It is more of a question that has come to light from some of the constituents. And that is that given the recent check we received from the province for $7 million, are any of those funds available to offset the increase in our budget? Or are they automatically allocated to something with the terms from the province? Thank you.
And actually, Councillor Mayor Burton has a response.
I'm going to ask for the CAO to supplement my answer, but that money is for capital. The BFF program, they have a website on the ontario.ca explaining the BFF and explaining that the money is available for capital projects that support housing. And the CAO can get into the details of there's an application involved, there's a test involved, and anyway, I'm gonna offer it to the CAO to answer for those details, because that's work she has to do.
Through you, Chair Grant. Mayor Burton is correct. It is for capital dollars. We actually need to report back to council on the plan of how we're going to spend those dollars that will meet the requirements of the program. So you'll see a report coming forward probably early in the new year. It has to be early in the new year in order to be able to take advantage of the funding.
Excellent. As I say, I think several people are sort of grappling with the fact you just got 7 million. Why are you asking us for an increase in funds? So that answers that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duddick. I'm moving to second-time speakers, Councillor Adams.
Okay, thanks very much. I wondered if it would be helpful for you if I gave you a motion to start with a recommendation for the whole thing so that you can then vote on it piece by piece.
Everything is helpful.
Okay, to get us going then, I'd like to move a motion that we recommend to the mayor that we move forward with the staff draft 2025 budget, including the 2025 items that are included in the council strategic priority, so that's the 1.162 million. To leave out the deferred 2026 items. And if staff could scroll down on that page, I believe there's a library item which I'd like to include. And I don't yet see another line there for efficiency savings of 600,000. Which would be a minus. Now, I know that, so that's what I'd like to put forward. Does this also, has this been, this has been updated to include the higher police budget at the regional, I think there. The 6.2 I see on line 6, I think reflects that. I just saw Councillor McNeese's motion, and I wondered if staff could provide any opinions on this and whether it would be useful to have it come back as a request for report, and then similar to what Councillor O'Meara discussed, if it would be appropriate for it to be funded through stabilization if we get a report from staff suggesting that we go through a planning study, or not a planning study, but a traffic study. Just trying to figure out how best to handle this particular ask.
Through you, Councillor Chair Grant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. I just want to clarify your question, Councillor Adams. So Councillor O'Meara's motion is related to the temporary setup, which is potentially tax stabilization that needs fairly quickly because the developer may not extend their permit, while the traffic study that we have to do for the permanent one-way through Councillor McNeese's motion is different. That is something we will have to look at it through a capital project for $135,000. We'll do a study. We'll do it through the streetscape program, through the public. That will take over 6 months. So are you referring to the temporary, or are you referring to the permanent traffic study?
I'm trying to understand the relationship between the
see.
two, and
Sure.
'cause I know they're not exactly the same thing, but I'm trying to understand the relationship in the area, and whether the funding ought to come through one-time funding. I know it's one-time funding because it's capital, but whether it ought to come through the budget, or whether council would benefit from a preliminary report from your team about this item, this option from Councillor McNeese, for us to then make a complete decision, or
So I'll try to provide some context then, and then I'll provide the answer if that's all right. So 85 Bronte is a current development. They have a temporary closure of the road where we made Bronte one-way as opposed to the two-way that was always there. As more of a timing issue, the potential for this construction developer to remove from this one-way arrangement to go back to a two-way is problematic for the area. It took quite a bit of our time to settle on from a two-way to a one-way for the area, and having to flip back and forth between the development timing and then just changing the road back and forth, every few months when they're ready. We feel that that would not be good from a traffic safety overall perspective. So the $70,000 from Councillor O'Meara's, it's good that they're doing motion separately because it's much easier to reference. The $70,000 that Councillor O'Meara is asking for is temporary, is one time, is meant to carry us forward for that temporary condition for $70,000 over a 2-year period. It's not a long-lasting request that need to go into operating, I'll say, forever. And then while Councillor McNeese's request is actually for us to do a traffic study that we will come back through council, through the streetscape study, to look at do we or do we not want to make that road permanently one way. And that is a separate request for the piece. But going back to the mayor's proposal, which I think is very fair, that in December we could come to council with a fairly simple explanation on where's the best way to place that $70,000. It doesn't have to go through the budget process. I believe that's correct, Jonathan. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And so what? And so this 135,000, could it be incorporated in that report back? So
Well,
we get the entire thing all together?
Through you, Councillor Grant, Chair Grant, the $135,000 would be an increase to the capital budget. So that would be a capital budget and budget request through the budget committee. The 70 could be dealt with temporarily through just a council resolution to spend it through tax stabilization. So it is actually separate instead of combined, my suggestion.
Okay, and could the funding, the ultimate funding of this capital item come, what would be the source of the funding of this capital item? Could it be through DCs or some other source? What's the source of the funding for it?
It will be through the capital reserve.
Thank you.
Through you.
Okay, so I'm gonna, I'll leave that to,
I'm looking for a motion here.
Yeah, so I've given you a motion. I understand Councillor McNeese would like to add this one in as well.
Sure, but.
So I'll give you that motion to add this one in.
Point of order, Chair Grant. Could we just clarify, is the motion on the floor going to allow us to vote on separate additional items?
We are trying to break this up into, I realize this is a large elephant. We're trying to break it up into bite-sized pieces, which is why I'm asking.
Because what Councillor Adams has currently stated allows us all to have, it's one big number. And previously, we've had the courtesy of being able to do them separately.
I absolutely agree. Mayor Burton.
Sorry, I thought I still had the floor. Just on a point of order, you lose the floor temporarily. All I'm trying to add to the explanation about order is the tools we have are to vote. We ask to separate an item. It's not even a vote. It's just the councillor says, I'd like to vote on that separately, and we vote on it separately. And then the main motion can be amended by adding things or taking away things that aren't on the board. So the normal tools are right there for us to use, and we wind up through our long-standing procedure able to vote on things one by one.
Very good. And we do want to break this up.
So the procedure is the main motion goes on the floor when it's recognized and made, and then the separations and additions and deletions,
yes,
they ensue.
So we are looking for a main motion.
So Mr. Chair, I've given you a main motion to begin with, which would allow other council members to bring forward amendments to change so that you could have separate votes. The motion that I'm giving you is the base budget, including the 2025 council strategic priorities, including line 22, the Oakville Public Library increase, the efficiencies shown on line 24, the capital budget item, which Councillor McNeese has just brought forward, which needs to be written in.
If we could do that, please.
And so that's my motion. If others would like to draw in or add or subtract, then they would bring an amendment to do that.
Great. So at this point, we are accepting the motion, and do we need to have discussion on this? And the first I see is Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair, just trying to be clear, but just recently, you just told me I had to, anything had to be a motion through the chair. I was not asking for additional money or reducing money. What I was asking for is more detail. Do I still need a motion for more detail related to snow clearing and leaf pickup? Do I have to put a motion through to
You
get
do
that
not
to
need
move?
to have a motion to get details, no.
I don't need that.
Yes.
No, that's what I thought. But when I was told, when you told me
If,
earlier.
if you have a motion
I was
that
taking my
affects the
direction.
base budget, then yes, we would have to have a motion.
Thanks.
If you've got questions as to specific programs, then no, we don't need to have a motion for that. I'm
certainly-
only asking that we have clarity for people who are watching and going through the budget process with us, that we have motions from councillors to say, this is why I want to spend this much. Any questions about what's going forward certainly don't have to have a motion.
I appreciate the clarification because about 10 minutes ago, you said I would need to give direction through the chair.
Well,
Thank you.
I am sorry for my inclarity. Nevertheless, I see Councillor Giddings has his hand up still, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be supplying you with two motions. Could I request that we have a brief break for those of us that are working on motions to get in a format that you have requested so we can get those on the floor?
Certainly. Before we do that, though, does anybody, much like Councillor Elgar, have questions about anything?
If I could add, still steal the floor here, I wanted to add to Councillor Elgar's motion. I appreciate the fact that residents ask a lot of questions and where the money goes and what various things cost. I wanted to add the other side of that. Based on the phone calls we get, the discussions we have, and social media, apparently the reason for the growth that we have is strictly a tax grab. I know we've provided a lot of information over the past years in terms of how we come up with the amounts, the effects of the school board, of the region, and everything else. Could we include that factual information as part of Councillor Elgar's request, just so we can provide residents with good data?
We can, through you, Chair Grant, we can certainly include that as well.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a break then. I'm going to give you 12 minutes to 11 o'clock. Sorry, Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Grant. So I support a break, and I believe Councillor Giddings has, maybe it would help prior to the break for him just to speak to the two items that he would like to put on the floor so that there's some consideration. And I would also ask that I think we need greater than 12 minutes just to think through a couple of these additional items. And my last point for clarity is, so I'm not sure why we're calling it efficiencies, but 600,000 was over a 2-year period. Was that correct? So would it be, so would we have to defeat the 600,000, or would a friendly amendment be considered to book only 300,000, which I still have reservations about, but at least it is for this coming year, not anticipating 2 years out versus anticipating possibly just 1 year out.
Through you, Chair Grant, if I can just deal with the full amount of the 600,000. I had recommended 600,000 over 2 years because I cannot with confidence say that I can equally split it between the 2 years, because I think the work that we need to do is going to spend a fair amount of time the first year on some of those projects, which won't actually be achieved or realized until the second year. So you may in fact see less money achieved in the very first year, 2025, and the balance all achieved in 2026. So that's why I would suggest to you that if you spread it over 2 years, you'd put the 600,000 currently in this year that was funded through the tax stabilization. And then in 26, that amount would be reduced with whatever we had saved. And so there would be then a smaller amount in tax stabilization. But I was trying not to define the dollars between the 2 years.
Okay, but you just added an extra level of clarity I need. Are you suggesting then this is through tax stabilization, which when I look on the chart, Dalabar, can you just clarify, is that what we're doing? Because it doesn't, I'm not clear. Is this showing hitting at the levy, or is it going to tax stabilization?
So it is adding $600,000 to the budget from tax stabilization, which then goes to the levy, reducing the levy.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Giddings, you had some comments?
I'm trying to understand just
Councillor
what.
Elgar,
Thank you.
are you
Yes,
speaking
comments
for-
on what I just heard. My concern is that this will be seen by the public as trying to make out in 2026 that in fact we have a very low budget compared to 2025, that we're trying to play games with where the dollars are spent. The taxpayers are saying, in a tax in an election year, all of a sudden everybody wants low taxes to make sure they look good going into the following term. It's a bit of a cloud that I don't want us to be labeled with. How do we avoid that?
Through you, Chair Grant, just to clarify, by putting it in this way, the savings on the tax levy are actually achieved in the 2025 budget. So we would be putting 600,000 in tax stabilization in as a placeholder for those efficiencies that are going to be achieved over 2 years. As the efficiencies are achieved, the tax stabilization will be removed, but the actual effect of this is to reduce the 2025 tax levy, not the 26.
I really appreciate staff with their expertise here, because that really helps, because when I heard it said, I thought, I hope this isn't seen as a game going forward. So thank you, Ms. Sully.
Councillor Giddings, Councillor Elgar stole most of your air, but you had 2 comments apparently?
Further to Councillor Hazelthiel's request, for me to mention the 2 items that I'll get the motion to you briefly. One is the Heritage Grant program that I shared with Council the other day. And the second one is regarding transit in terms of the services that the groups that we provide free transit for now, and request to include those with accessibility challenges. And I'll working on those now.
Thank you. All right. I did reach out to every member of this committee yesterday to ask for any input you had, so I'm surprised that you all feel like you need more time, but we will now move this to, I guess, 11:30 for when we return. And that will give you time to consider things that I asked you to consider yesterday. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. Before we get into individual motions, I just want to go back and make sure that we get comments from members of our council. And I believe we've got Councillor Giddings asking questions first.
Thank you, Chair. Everyone has the motions, I believe.
We do, and we're going to be looking at those and voting on those after comments.
Well, I'm good then. I can wait for those to come up.
Councillor Hazelthiel.
Thank you, through you, Chair Grant. I understand we might have some of that additional information on efficiencies projects.
Through you, Chair. Yes, thank you for that additional time. So I had talked about some Greenbelt training that we do. Those are staff that are trained in the departments under our larger continuous improvement program that's run corporately. So the list of 10 includes the community activation grant process and the community investment strategy, and online service standards and qualification criteria. There are 2 separate programs related to the on, cross, and offboarding. One is the employee life cycle program, and the other is the corporate training program. Oh, sorry, there's 3, as well as the ITS application access. So there's 3 components to that on and offboarding. And that one is actually a project that we are coordinating corporately because it does hit every department across the organization. Clerks is looking at their in-house printing processes and communications, a bylaw management process as well in clerks. We also have the e-plan experience and improvements. Commissioner Kaminsky was talking about that. We have the road corridor process and online service component to that. And then I had talked about the government relations research function earlier being a new function within the organization. We are looking at a process for how departments are able to access that and how it's prioritized going forward. So those are examples of the 10 Greenbelt. And in addition, we still have ongoing implementation I mentioned earlier associated with the procurement lean review that has been done, as well as business continuity planning.
So my only follow-up to all this then is, will it maintain or will these initiatives have a priority of maintaining or enhancing our service levels and through the project?
So I would say our goal is always to go in to either maintain or improve our service levels. And this is a way to try and allow for either a faster process or a reduced number of steps so that we can take on more volume. So the goal is to maintain or improve.
And will, I'm assuming will get reported out to us over the course of the next 2 years, the measurables around how we are doing on these projects?
Yes, you will. Not only on these ones, but as CAO Cloesy mentioned, we are gathering efficiencies and savings elsewhere. We just haven't been as good at tracking that. So we will be looking to track those as well.
Okay. And my final follow-up is, so in terms of things like green infrastructure, which is pressing, and some of these other items that are more pressing, they're not part of the continuous improvement and the efficiencies, but they are part of the support mechanisms, or sorry, what business, strategic business advisors or business support is going to ensure our deliverables in 2025?
Yes, that's not part of the continuous improvement program.
Thank you for the additional information. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Adams.
Thanks very much. So I note that on our spreadsheet, we've got line items 25 and 26 for the transit caravan and the heritage grant programs. I'm happy to incorporate those in my motion for you if that is helpful in terms of dealing with the procedure. And could I speak to the item now, or are there any other items that are meant to be amended?
Why don't we get questions through first, and then we'll start discussing
Excellent. Okay.
items.
I wait for that.
Thank you. Councillor Ogar.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I thank staff for all the work they've done on this budget and the clarification on the 600,000. And in fact, when I previously said it would impact on 2026 budget, in fact, it will not. If we do not see the savings, it would be 2027 before that would show up, correct? On the taxation budget.
That's correct. If we're unsuccessful in finding those, either through direct savings or cost avoidance, it would show up in 27.
I thank you very much for the clarification on this and all the discussion on it. And I look forward to getting more information on it. And I support 25 and 26, the transit care and the heritage growth program also. So I think hopefully this will move forward. Godspeed. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so we will now move forward again in 5.1 to look at the different motions that are coming forward. I believe our first motion, and hopefully we can get this on screen from our tech department, is from Councillor McNeese. There we go. Councillor McNeese, do you want to speak to this?
I believe I covered it earlier, but
You did, but nevertheless, we want more.
Happy to discuss anything further. And thank you, Councillor Adams, for clarifying a few things on it so that we're all on the same page. But we just think it would be a lost opportunity if we didn't include it while our streetscaping work is already taking place. And another possibility of this is as development is happening, which it currently is, funds become available from the developer to do the streetscaping. And if it can be done in a consistent way to the standard of the whole streetscaping plan, that's beneficial. And that's what this motion would do. Thank you.
All right. So as we're voting on these individually, I will ask then, seeing how this is properly moved, all in favor? Sorry, oh, you have a...
Sorry, I thought it was I thought our staff already had drafted a motion that incorporated the effects of this. I'm not sure if it included the exact words. I just want to make sure that we've got it all together.
Can I ask a question?
Mayor Burton.
Maybe someday.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I sense that we are at a point of consensus and voting on individual items might not be necessary. Is it the will of the committee to vote on the main motion, given that the mover of the main motion has incorporated everybody's suggestions?
Well, we can take a straw poll.
Well, does anyone object? That would be the way you check.
Yes. And everybody seems to be okay. Can we just look through the different motions, perhaps?
They're on the, if you go to the spreadsheet, you see them all.
And if every member of council is okay with this, then we can move the entirety of these as moved by Councillor Adams. Does anybody wish to speak to this?
I was hoping to speak to it.
Please go ahead.
For objections, so.
Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, I wanted to thank you, Chair Grant, for your work over the last month and a half or so. It's much appreciated. I know you've done a bunch of other things beyond what we see in the committee, and so I think we should recognize that extra effort. So thank you very much for that. The other things I wanted to say is, despite the larger than what we all might hope for in terms of overall tax increase, I think it's a responsible way of eating the impacts of inflation that we've all been feeling for a number of years, and it'll take us probably another year or so to finish eating all the inflationary impacts that we've seen over the last year or two. And second, while we're eating these inflationary impacts, we're maintaining our services and enhancing a few of them along the way, as we see in this budget. And finally, despite these changes and the inflationary impacts we're seeing, we're still going to be significantly lower than all of our neighboring municipalities, Milton, Burlington, and Mississauga. And that's a good news story for our residents, and they should take some solace in the fact that we've done what we've done. So thank you very much again for your service and your effort. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Hassett-Thiel.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Grant. So I'll support the motion on the floor. I do want to thank my colleagues and in particular around the caravan motion that Councillor Giddings has put forward and the heritage. I think they're investments in things that we take quite seriously around enabling people to have joy in their life and to get around and their need and our respect for heritage in the town. I also think that the efforts by our Bronte team are really essential to getting it right through what will be a difficult construction period. I want to express some gratitude to the fire chief for taking some time and helping me understand the 8 firefighters and the importance and the response times in the north and how that will be beneficial, and some of the assurances we've heard today around really important services. I remain very deeply concerned about how we approach the acquisition of parkland. I take some assurance from the mayor that there are ways that we can acquire access to dollars that can address the need, as well as I know that our commissioner and our director of parks have an interest in trying to find a way forward to secure in the strategic growth nodes essential green space. So I will support the motion on the floor and hope when the mayor's budget comes back that he will take some of my other earlier comments to heart as well around the importance of equity and inclusion and in particular the parks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for my part, I would like to thank staff and the patience of members of council. Certainly working on a budget of this size is not in my wheelhouse, so I appreciate the fact that everybody's been forthright and honest in how they want to approach this. Again, it's been an interesting process, so I'm glad that we are in agreement to what we've achieved today. So at that point now, I guess we shall vote. All in favor of Councillor Adams' motion? And that carries. And I will point out that next Thursday, the mayor will present this budget, and the 2 following Thursdays after that, we'll have a chance to discuss and acknowledge this. So thank you very much. And I believe we are going to move to 5.2. That responses from staff and requests of the Budget Committee are received. We have a motion from Councillor Elgar. Great. All in favor? That is carried. We have no confidential discussion items, so now we are actually done. Thank you very much, everybody. Before lunch.